When the facts bend reality, this is beyond plausible.
When Darwin introduced the concept of sexual selection, he fell victim to a bias of his era. The flamboyant tail feathers of peacocks, the large antlers of red deer, or the majestic manes of lions. All these traits fall under a concept that Charles Darwin, the father of evolution, called sexual selection. According to this, males in the animal world must develop more prominent features to compete in the mating race with females. Sometimes, they even had to fight each other to win a mate. Sexual selection ensures that only a few males with the best traits, showcasing their appearance and strength, get exclusive rights to mate with females to produce the healthiest offspring. This has led many scientists to wonder, what about the reverse scenario? Do females ever compete to choose their mates? Culture influences science. The truth is, when Darwin introduced the concept of sexual selection, he made a bias error due to his time. It was the 1870s and the Victorian era, when gender prejudices strongly dominated society. Women were excluded from political, economic, and social activities. Their roles were almost solely tied to housework, family care, and looking after husbands and children. When Darwin observed the competition among males in the animal world, it seemed to reflect what was happening in human society. That males had to compete, while females had the right to choose their mates. Darwin thought this was an imbalance arranged by nature. Other scientists following Darwin also fell into a similar bias. For every 10 studies on sexual selection discussing male competition, there was only one in the opposite direction, addressing females. Shalom Franjantage, an evolutionary biology researcher at Uppsala University, Sweden, said that many people are influenced by the culture they live in and what they see daily. This inadvertently creates biased trends in scientific research, including the concept that sexual selection only occurs on the male side, Franjantage said. Exceptions were overlooked, such as female chacana birds also exhibiting marking and territorial defense behaviors similar to males in other species. They also compete to possess multiple male mates. In some pipefish species like seahorses, the male's role is even completely reversed, as they are the ones that carry the pregnancy. Male seahorses incubate the young in body pouches until they mature, while females are freed from that duty. More mates means sexual selection is more prevalent. Nevertheless, it's not that Darwin was entirely wrong in thinking males compete more to get mates. In the 20th century, a British geneticist, Angus John Bateman, developed a hypothesis to explain that. Bateman stated that in reproductive activities, males typically produce a large number of sperm at low metabolic cost, while females, on the other hand, use a lot of energy to produce a smaller number of eggs. For this reason, Bateman said, the mating strategies of the two sexes would also differ. Males need to seek and compete for mates to maximize their reproductive potential. Females develop a tendency to choose mates rather than compete. By the late 20th century, two scientists, Stephen J. Arnold and David Dewar, used this idea to develop a metric called the Bateman gradient. It is a measure based on the reproductive output and the number of matings of a species. In other words, it's the number of offspring produced, indicating how many times the organism mates. The larger the Bateman gradient, the more an organism must mate to have more offspring, meaning it needs more mates. Tim Chanek, an evolutionary biologist at the University of Montpellier, France, said that if having more mates brings positive benefits, it leads to mate competition. And this competition is essentially the nature of sexual selection that Darwin referred to. Together with Fromental, Chanek conducted a study to prove that the value of the Bateman gradient could be an indirect factor quantifying sexual selection behavior. This hypothesis means that at one end of the spectrum, some species may have males fighting over females. At the opposite end, females would have to compete over males. When females in the animal world also compete jealously. In a study conducted last year, Fromental and Chanek compiled 111 Bateman gradients calculated for females of 72 animal species, from beetles to mollusks and mammals. The research team observed that species with larger Bateman gradients indeed develop polygamous behavior or mating with multiple partners. A typical example is the Mediterranean fruit fly, Ceratitis capitata. Females of this fly species often compete by developing wide wings, dark colors, and hairy leg scales. When competing to attract males, female flies inflate their abdomens like balloons, making themselves larger and more attractive to male flies. The Tetraeutetrix crab was once considered a classic example of sexual selection behavior in males. Male crab feathers are often more flamboyant and unique than females. They also frequently fight to win mates. But recent studies show that female crabs have also evolved to participate in that competition. Other female birds also develop colors, although they are smaller than those of males. Scientists believe this is a subtle sign of competition, as both males and females prefer mates with thicker and larger colors. The same happens with melurus birds, where females also develop colorful plumage to attract males. But the most prominent example might be the dung beetle. Evolution equipped females of this species with a horn to fight other females in competition. Scientists explain that fighting behavior carries risks of bodily injury, which males can endure more easily. Essentially, they only need to survive until mating with the male is complete, and they don't need to be male. Females, on the other hand, have the task of laying and incubating eggs or carrying pregnancy long after mating. If their bodies are injured, it would be a disadvantage for the species. Therefore, not many species risk giving females the ability to fight to choose mates. In summary, males can harm each other, but there is no advantage in appearance for males. Therefore, not many animal species risk giving females the ability to evaluate and choose mates. In summary, despite the weight of human assumptions and emotional prejudices, Fromental says that generally, sexual selection affects both females. However, the pattern of these behaviors often only stops at the level of appearance competition. In the animal world, females rarely compete directly with each other through fights to win mates.
Curious? Subscribe and step through the next anomaly.